Hello and welcome to the audio recording of the book Tarona's Ghostly Encounters. These are accounts of real situations which occurred while Tarona was working as a paranormal investigator. So hold on to your seats.
Chapter 4. A newspaper reader whose home was afflicted by a presence, the most ghostly part of Loughborough, photograph that was believed to be cursed. The Loughborough and Shropshire Echo newspaper received a telephone call from a reader asking if I would go to her home because she believed it was haunted by the ghost of a child. This woman, whom we will call Sharon, was not afraid of the ghost at all, but felt it was time to help it on its way to the other side. Sharon, I've changed her name, told me she became aware of a cold sensation and a feeling of a presence shortly after buying the house and moving in. This had been several months earlier. Sharon recalled how she sometimes heard a child's voice whispering. At first she believed it was one of her own children, but when she visited their bedrooms, several times she found them sound asleep. This became somewhat eerie after a while, and Sharon said that a couple of days earlier, while sitting in a bath, she felt a strong breeze surrounding her, even though all the windows and doors were closed. Suddenly, overwhelmed with sadness, she found herself crying for no apparent reason, she said. This will sound crazy, she continued, looking embarrassed, but it felt as though the spirit was clinging onto me, and even found myself holding out my hands to it. Once I'd visited every room in the house. My psychic radar confirmed a child had drowned within the vicinity. Suddenly, a very strong undercurrent of energy greeted me, especially in the bathroom. A link with water, maybe. Strange as it might sound, I was positive that it was not so much the house that was haunted as the land the house was built on. Doors and windows in totally opposite directions were being shown to me, so I asked if any structural alteration had taken place to her knowledge. She confirmed my findings to be correct. This house was haunted by a spirit child who appeared to be around 3 years of age, a little girl with long fair hair. I felt this child had been on the land for many decades. Could it be Sharon's children who first drew her into the house? Could she have wanted someone to play with? Sharon was an especially loving mother and was beginning to feel the spirit child to be part of the family. The woman refused to be present while I did a cleaning ritual. Sadly, she felt she was abandoning the little ghost. Sharon later told me she had, in the past, became aware of a strong smell of stagnant water that came and went alongside of the child's presence. We asked through the echo for information about the area and if anyone knew of a little girl who had drowned in the Loughborough Canal near to this woman's home. So far, no one has been able to find out anything more. The good thing is the house is now at rest. Tara Rippon, reporter with the Echo, accompanied me while I did an investigation. We were given a photo Sharon had taken that showed an eerie fog. The Echo's own photographer studied the photograph and came to the conclusion that it was a chemical fog. I am not so sure. By the year 1778, Loughborough had become an inland port, joined to the River Soar by a canal. The town was transformed in the 1780s with a barge building industry appearing and new houses and warehouses springing up beside the wharves and the northern part of the town. I feel it's most likely that this little girl had once lived in one of the houses by the canal. Around 100 years ago, Loughborough was described as a sorry place, badly paved and with inadequate street lighting. Most of its population of around 11,000 were poor and did not live in particularly attractive town. Opposite the parish church in Sparrow Hill stood the old manor house, which still exists and is now a hotel. At the end of the manor house was a small open space known as Hen Park. A passageway known as the Conneries connected it to Baxter Gate and Nottingham Road. Many reports of haunted properties in that area have come to my attention. This is not surprising when we consider how old that part of town is. There was a house in the Sparrow Hill area that I had investigated many years ago that had a poltergeist in it. The occupants were awakened most nights by cries coming from an empty bedroom next to theirs. They had experienced objects being thrown around the house. The final straw came when the woman stepped into the bath and it went crashing through the floor. Thankfully, she was not hurt, but was of course badly shaken after such a terrifying experience. The couple moved out of the house, and within days I have no way of knowing if the poltergeist left also. The property has since been demolished. A short walk away from Sparrow Hill is Leicester Road. A pub that was at the time called the Cross Keys once had its own poltergeist too. This caused much trouble for former landlords and their families and was subject to many investigations over several years. Exaggerated tales circulated, one in particular about a cursed photo. Arrangements were made for me and two Echo reporters to do a ghost hunt in the pub, now called the Phantom and Firkin. When I first walked into the bar, I could pick up aggressive energy. The energy seemed to be coming from directly above the bar, seeping down from the ceiling. On inspection, we found a tiny unlit room. In the room there had been an old lady who wore black, and I felt she died of an illness such as Parkinson's disease. Although I could feel her energy, she was no longer there. The manager of that time asked me to examine an old wedding photo which was supposed to be cursed. There was nothing wrong with the photograph itself, but I did pick up that someone in the photo had TB, and for some reason I thought it was in the hip. I sensed that the anger in the bar could be more than likely connected with a bad fight that had taken place in the pub some time previously. Within days of the story appearing in the Echo, a Sheila Barker from Birstall phoned Tara Rippon and told her that her parents, Dorothy and Sidney Rogers, married on September the 3rd in the early 1920s, and just as I said, one of the people pictured had TB, although not of the hip. How delighted I was to have been able to put the record straight for this lady and to assure all concerned the former poltergeist had nothing to do with Mrs. Barker's family photo. None of us need a ghost in our home to move objects. Psychokinesis is possible and could be connected to environmental forces by the magnetic fields in the human brain. This is similar to birds using magnetic lines of force to find their way home. Experiments also show this activity to be stronger around the time of the full moon, so it could be possible that matter and mind are the same energy. In the USA, an organization called PAIR, short for Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research, has been doing programs on psychokinesis since 1979. They have been studying the interaction of human consciousness with sensitive physical devices, machines, etc. Let me end this chapter by sharing with you one of my own strange paranormal experiences. It's about Auntie Lottie's shoes. There was an urgent rapping at our door. It woke the entire household. I knew before my father had got down the stairs that bad news was waiting at the door. Upright in bed I sat, straining to hear what was being said downstairs. My Auntie Lottie had died, and the police officer who had to deliver the news was giving my father his condolences. It was in the 1950s, and ordinary homes like ours did not have a telephone. Bad news always came via the good old British bobby. Even though Auntie Lottie lived in Manchester, it never stopped the special bond we had between us. I loved her very much, and while everyone else drooled over my new baby sister, Auntie Lottie remained faithful to me alone. She was a pretty petite woman who wore high-heel shoes. My thoughts went back to our last meeting at Christmas, and I remembered how she never got to tell us something she said she wanted to before her return to Manchester. Had she known she was dying? Yes, maybe she had, because the last time we had been together there was a quietness with her, a solemnness somehow. After the policeman left my parents, they started to make plans for us to go to Manchester. I did not go to the funeral. Instead, both my sister and I stayed in Auntie Lottie's apartment with a kindly old woman called Alice. Funerals were no place for children, she had said. After the funeral, Uncle Jim, Auntie Lottie's husband, handed me a watch, saying she would have wanted me to have it. He also insisted that I should take some of the clothes and shoes. My small feet fitted into the lovely high-heel shoes. However, my 9-year-old body was too young to wear them. Apart from in dressing-up games, that is. Still, I promised to take care of them because they had belonged to her. Several weeks later, I returned home from school to find the shoes and clothes had been removed from my room. I was devastated when my mother told me she had given the items of clothing to a family friend, Betty. Those clothes were too old for you, insisted my mother. How I had wanted to go round to Betty's house and demand my Auntie Lottie's things back, but I was only 9, and in those days someone of that age never told an adult to do anything. Sadness overwhelmed me, for I'd promised to take care of the clothes and shoes. That evening, Auntie Lottie came to me in a dream and told me not to worry about the clothes because everything was being sorted. I did not understand what she meant by being sorted, not until a week later, that is. Betty came into the house on the following Saturday. In her hand she was carrying a large shopping bag. She pulled out various items of clothing I instantly recognized, and she explained that nothing would fit her once she got it home. Taking out a pair of the lovely high-heel shoes from her bag, I was horrified to see how shabby they looked. Fancy giving me this heap of rubbish, she said. But my mother insisted that she had even tried them on before she took them and had said they were perfect. My mother looked utterly puzzled, her mind searching for an explanation, but she could not find one. Take the shoes back to your bedroom and put the clothes in the wash basket, instructed my mother. The following Monday, Auntie Lottie's clothes were washed and dried and placed back inside my wardrobe, ready for me to dress up in any time I wished. The shoes no longer looked shabby and seemed to take on a newness. There was no explanation for this happening. My mother said washing made clothes clean. but nothing could turn shabby things back to new. However, I knew my mother was wrong and that Auntie Lottie had intervened. Our special bond would never be broken, not even by death. Just to explain to the listener, my Auntie Lottie was such a lovely lady and we was very close. And my mother had no right to go into my wardrobe and give things away that Auntie Lottie wanted me to have. And the lady I call Betty is not a real name, but she was one of these grab-all, nasty sort of personalities, and there was no way my Auntie Lottie would allow stuff she wanted me to have to be given away. And that's why when I'll call her Betty got the things home, things started to happen to them where the clothes looked shabby and the shoes didn't fit. But when she brought them back, everything went back to normal and they was back in my wardrobe and I was able to use them for playing and the shoes looked fine.